mental health stuff a lot too. Do you think, because we've talked, I think, a little bit about like Twitter and all that other shit too, but like as far as mental health goes and the crisis in the country and people discovering like, you know, PTSD, latent kind of, you know, stuff they've been going through.
So much trauma.
I feel like because of the internet and because of social media, especially like Twitter, especially when the media tends to pick up on a smaller percentage of the population who might be dealing with mental health issues and makes it, you know, more mainstream. Do you think it affects the people who may not like you're like say you say you're doing pretty good, but if you're constantly reading about how the things that may make you happy or the normal shit that's going on is somehow affecting a swath of the population that has mental health issues, do you think that creates a larger issue of mental health? Because it's I kind of, and this may not be making any sense yet because I haven't fully formed this thought. But because I feel like it's like if you ever lived with somebody who has mental health issues, right? And I, you know, or dealt with it for a long period of time, it gets to the point where you're like, fuck, I got to take a break. I'm sad now. Or you've seen them kind of like break down. But because of social media and lazy journalism, and then kind of going like, oh, they all hated this one piece of entertainment, but it's this group of people who maybe they're too sensitive to some, or maybe they're dealing with some shit, but the media grabs it, throws it out there as if this is how everybody feels for all the time, and you're responsible for it. If you're a functioning normal human being, or maybe you've got your shit in check, do you then become that person living with somebody who's dealing with mental health shit, and it's affecting the way you live? Because now it's why I feel like a lot of family members who maybe like generationally argue over stupid shit, whether it's, you know, political trans rights or whatever it is, where they're like constantly feeling like they're making people feel like shit when really that's not the case. You know what I mean? Like, I'm probably explaining this poorly. I should have formed this better. But like, you know what I'm saying? Do you think there's an issue with that? Do you think that's like, you know, cascading over everything?
I love this question. And I've been thinking about this a lot because I've been doing a lot of reading lately in terms of like attachment styles, right? So people have different attachment styles, like avoidant, anxious, all of that stuff, right? Okay, so I'm like really interested in attachment styles and how people function, right? So you know, a huge thing around attachment styles is, do you see the world, again, this is sort of like what the world owes you. Do you see the world as having a responsibility for your feelings, or do you see yourself as having a responsibility for your feelings? Okay, so somebody who is an anxious attachment person, they see the world as being responsible for how they feel. So if there's a lot of incoming, they will point to the world and say, hey, world, stop that. Like, don't do that because I'm going to feel a certain kind of way if you keep doing that. Now, avoidance are the opposite, right? So they look at the world and they will say, I am responsible for my own stuff. I regulate me. I don't care what's going on out there. There could be like stuff blowing up and so forth. I'm going to regulate and maintain, and I'm going to be like, blip, no, nothing. Now, there are pros and cons to both of those, right? Sometimes, you know, at a certain point, if there's like all sorts of stuff going on out in the world, you know, and you're like, I have no reaction to that whatsoever. Well, that's usually people that were like, you know, potentially highly traumatized as children, and they just shut off a switch and, you know, never to be heard from again. Conversely, the anxious folks are the ones who, you know, become very hypervigilant and they need reassurance because the external world is just coming into them. So how I would answer that would be, and of course, we don't really talk about these folks anymore, but the fourth group are the securely attached people, you know, right? So we don't talk about them very much, but the securely attached folks are the ones who can regulate. They can regulate themselves. They can be grounded. They can be present in their own feelings, yet they can also acknowledge that there are some things externally that can have an impact, but they regulate that, right? They say, I'm impacted by that external thing, but I can regulate myself so that then I can process that. Unicorns. So I would answer your question with attachment style. And basically how I would answer would be, if you are a securely attached person, or, you know, you're somebody who's sort of like secure in your personhood, however you want to frame that. And so there's incoming for you either from like other people or from, the universe. Most securely attached people will internalize what they're seeing and then will say to themselves, I'm going to regulate myself. And even though I'm having feelings about that, I will regulate. Now, if it becomes a lot, if they have, a partner that is has a lot of sort of mental health issues, they may need help regulating that. So maybe they look to a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and they have a support system. Maybe they're dealing with like a narcissist, right? And so they're like, oh my gosh, like it's this total incoming, and I need to tell all my good news to like a friend because that person's not going to be able to hear any of it. So I can't tell them my good stuff, right? So they securely attached people can sort of make that universe for themselves. The anxious folks are the ones who are going to have a little bit more problem because they're taking the external stuff. So they might be sitting there looking at Twitter and their partner and so forth and just sort of like being very unable to sort of like regulate that because they're thinking it's all coming into me and I can't handle it. The avoidant folks, same thing. They're going to just push that. Oh, wait, I don't need any of that. And so they're not even regulating anything because they've batted it away and they're just like, I'm not hearing that. So I hope that partially answers your question, because the way I see your question is how well do you deal with the incoming, right? Whether that's from a partner, whether that's from social media. And some people deal with it. They struggle with it a lot. Other people bat it away and they will tell you, I feel nothing. I don't hear anything. Leave me alone. And those people, the ones who are like, them, right? Well, and then you got the third folks that can balance the regulation pretty well.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. Like nobody's talking about what we were just talking about. Nobody, not the news, not anybody doing any kind of interviewing or anything like that, because like, and I think a good example too is like a comment section on anything posted on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. But it's like you'll see like somebody post like this, people are having feelings about such and such a show or a movie. And then underneath the comment thread, you'll see all the different types of personalities you just listed. 100%. Because this smaller group finds the show Friends to be problematic or offensive or whatever the fuck it is, and it's affecting their mental health. Right. Everybody underneath
Friends is doing it to them. Friends is doing it to them.
Right. And then subsequently, the people who enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that means family members, friends, acquaintances, or whatever. So it's their fault. But you look at those comment threads and what you see is the people who, because I genuinely think everybody's pretty empathetic. But I think if you're telling me that I'm a piece of shit because of a show that comforts me and is turned to my coping mechanism, then you get, because that's, if you look at the comment threads, it's fuck you. Yeah. What are you telling? I'm a piece because I like this show. You're out of your fucking mind. And then you get everybody arguing with each other. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm using Friends as an example, but it doesn't matter what it is.
That's a little anxious avoidant action going on there, right? Like, or a little bit like, or however you want to phrase it. That's people who sort of like worldview is that the universe owes them something. In this case, it's to regulate them.
Right.
So you have people who look at you, like, let's take you, John. Like, so John, you need to regulate me. And how you regulate me is you don't say certain things to me and you don't do certain things around me. And you should know that. And when you trigger me, you're triggering me and you should like figure that out because you are responsible for regulating me. I'm not responsible for regulating me. I can't regulate me. Whatever's going on with me, I can't regulate me. You need to regulate me. And if you can't do that, we're going to have a big old fight. It's not going to be pretty, right?
I recognize myself in that statement and it hurts. It hurts a little bit.
And then the opposite are the people who like, I regulate everything within me. You can't say anything to me. You could call me a piece of crap. You could say whatever. Yeah. It affects me not. It bounces off me because I'm the Teflon of feelings. And you could just bing, bing, bing. I don't feel anything. And you're like, do you feel anything? It's like, no, I do not. I don't feel anything. I'm just the bing, bing, bing person. Right. I don't feel anything. Right. So that's the person at the opposite end of the pendulum. By the way, those folks usually get together. Well, those are the people that usually,
But I feel like I have been both of those people in my life. And I think that you should be able to, like when you were a kid, when I was a kid, I was very much that type of person. And I don't want to, like, I do struggle with sometimes. I'm like, God, do I feel fucking anything? Because you could literally do everything you just said. And I know that's from stand up or just from having like idiots say shit to me 24/7 where I'm like, if you let it get to you, you can't fucking function. And I used to be one of those people who like, you know, I mean, I used to be, when I was a kid, I went from being afraid of my own shadow and the dark and whatever it was to like, you know, I don't really give a shit about much now. Like that does it, that I can't, like if it's something I can't specifically control, I'm like, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And most healthy people, you know, there's a continuum. Like you have, you know, moment, and you know, there's certain people that, you know, you're gonna be a little different around and so forth. And so you can sort of, there's like, you know, a little bit. It's when you're at the opposites and you stay there. You know, when you just always look at the world as having a responsibility to regulate you. And so then, to your point, when you social media hits you with something or your spouse says something, they always have a responsibility to regulate your emotion. And I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about like that somebody else has a responsibility for your stuff that you don't have, not because you don't want it. I mean, maybe you do, I don't know, but you can't do it. These are folks who legit cannot like regulate themselves. They can't just like, sit in their stuff.
Don't you think then that the large portion of the society has put us in a position though where we have like, because I never want to be that person who is just like, hey, listen, like, I'm really not that person. I think individually, one-on-one, I try very, very hard to be like, I hear you. I don't want to fuck you up. You're a close friend, whatever the fuck it is. But I think these strangers that we don't see every day that are on the internet that are complaining about this shit, you kind of want to be like, fuck your mental health. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just trying to live my life. And I think this particular comic's fucking hilarious. And I don't want him to go, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to be that person, but it's creating a rift. Like having to pay attention to the unstable 24/7, I think is creating a fucking problem, right? Like, I don't know, because I know that sounds heartless and insane, but I really do feel like, God, like there used to be like, it's that weird line that people tread where I never want to sound like I'm a guy who, first of all, I'm a white male. Fucked right now, you know what I mean? So I never want to be
for you, but it's I like you a lot, so you know.
I appreciate it. No, but I really like, I know people who know me know this, but like there's people who don't know me. So like I never want to be that guy who's like, who looks like I am, you know,
insensitive or
who's being on the side of like you know, like PC woke blah 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 jerk off, you know, whatever. I'm gonna wipe that out of the show, but first real edit. But like, you know, that kind of shit, because like I don't feel that way specifically, but I think when it's this pressure cooker situation where you're like, look, I gotta fucking be me, and like people used to just go to see a movie, like I think it's put us in the position where I hate the fact that everyone, but I think when it's but like, you know, that kind of shit, because like I don't feel that way specifically, but I think when it's this pressure cooker situation where you're like, look, I gotta fucking be me, and like people used to just go to see a movie, like I think it's put us in the position where I hate the fact that everyone has to talk about like I have friends who I'll watch something with, and if they laugh at it and it's inappropriate and it's wrong, which 90% of laughter is laughing at the wrong thing if it's done artfully and correctly, it's a release, it's cathartic, it's fun.
Yeah.
But like you'll watch something with them and they'll laugh at it and then immediately turn to you and go, but also just so you know, and you just want to be like, fuck off. Like we've known each other for 20-something years.
There's no comment thread on this interaction.
Thank you. Oh like, my fucking
You don't
God.
have to be afraid of getting judged.
Perfectly put. Exactly. Right. You're like, just, you know, like, but they're like, you know, just so we know, I shouldn't have, you know, technically they are representative of and you're like, I don't fuck, I'm just laughing at Ryan Reynolds. Can I just laugh at Ryan fucking Reynolds and go and eat popcorn, maybe get a heart attack? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Everything that you're saying, I co-sign and I agree with. And I feel like I know you well enough. Although again, I always chuckle that I've never met you in real life.
I know we're
but we're gonna rectify that.
We should.
Yeah.
Now I'm super paranoid that I'm gonna get you sick, by the way. Like I'm not, but like if you're like, we're gonna meet each other in real life, I'm gonna like, Heather, I'm gonna do it in a hazmat suit and a fucking bubble, because I know you've been like way more like I still haven't gotten COVID. I know, dude. it's beautiful, but I'm like, you know, they won't let me get my flu shot yet because they're like, you're still coughing, buddy. Which by the way, I'm sorry, you were saying something. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
We'll talk before we end. We'll 30 seconds to bust up a few myths. But no, the only thing I was going to say about that is just, you know, I know you well enough to know that you are a well-meaning person who is not trying to bust somebody's life up with some of what you're saying.
Thank you.
And so you would hope that people who know you, or even people who don't know you, would know that's sort of not the default intention. But again, you know, for some people, it's just so difficult for them to be able to like
regulate,
do that work for themselves.
Yeah,
that they really can't. So the triggers are just constant for them. There's no off switch for triggers for them come from where they might. And, you know, like in academia, we talk a lot about trigger warnings, right? Which, by the way, the research is like out as to how helpful they are. Sometimes trigger warnings can actually trigger concern, like fear for people of what's to come, which is an interesting.
It's really anticipating it happening.
Right, exactly. So there's that with trigger warnings.
And also, how do you know what you don't like unless you watch it? Like, if you're gonna watch Gone with the Wind for the first time, by the way, not worth it. But if you're gonna watch Gone, you know, I don't know, maybe educational purposes, whatever you're doing, it's an okay movie. But like, if you're gonna watch that for the first time and this thing pops up that says this will fuck you up, well, you may not know if you like it or not. Like, I would have never watched horror movies if every fucking horror movie was like, "Hey, kid, do you want to never sleep until you're 12?" And you're like, I don't know. Then I wouldn't have watched E.T.
That also assumes that there are certain universal things that people are all going to be triggered by. Like, for example, something that really, I'm doing it now. I'm like, there's not very many things that make me do what I'm doing right now. But like when I hear like a Sharpie, like on a piece of paper, I'm like, yeah. So like I was watching the show the other day and it's like somebody was writing with a Sharpie and they heard and I was like, oh no, that's a Sharpie on paper, right? So they're not these universal things that we know will just sort of like blanketly trigger people, right?
Yeah.
There's all sorts of things that can be very upsetting and very disturbing for people. And so sort of blanketly saying this will be a trigger to you, we don't really know what that will be. And it can be more terrifying for some people to say that than them just sort of like experiencing what they're going to experience. But again, the whole notion of that is that the external person is regulating you and the content you get, because once you see it, it will be so upsetting for you that you yourself will not be able to regulate yourself. And that's something that, you know, I mean, when we think about sort of the wonderful world of like therapy and psychiatrists and psychologists, you know, that's a space where people can really think about that. And if they can't afford one, you know, are there ways to sort of like seek out help and so forth? But that's a really tough way to go through life, to sort of constantly be on guard that people will sort of say something to you and you will be unable to maintain your equilibrium.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think we were going to like finally talk about myths, of which I write about myths all the time, COVID myths.
Right.
So Diana, like one of the things I do is I have like a sort of like series of articles that I do for a paper about like COVID myths. And like two of them that I'm doing now is the